Hi, and thanks for joining me. I'm Dr. Neil Hall from Western Sydney University, and we're talking about the messiness of group facilitation today. A few years ago, a student came to me and said, "Neil, I really loved your group work classes. They made everything seem so fun and easy. But then when I got to practice, I discovered just how hard, complicated things could be. So this tidy screen, starting screen, it really should be represented with a bit of a scribble on it, because we can learn tidy theory, but when we get to practice, we find that it can be quite messy. To help us understand the messiness, we can get a grip on the different understandings of groups that are about. Now, some people view groups as a linear model. It's clinical, it's organized, it's sequential. There are also some people that view groups as more cyclical, where they are still sequential, but they tend to be a little bit more fluid, a little bit more responsive. And then there are people who view groups as kind of more organic, having a life of their own. They're dynamic, they're very random, quite in the moment, I suppose, but non-consecutive. Egan and Konoya, for example, have this linear model of the helping process that begins and ends in a linear way. We, of course, know Tuckman's model of group stages, and we all remember them because they rhyme: forming, storming, norming, performing, and mourning. But he suggests that groups always follow these stages, perhaps for different amounts of time, but they always follow and always in this order. Slattery suggests a cyclical model of group work, which starts with engaging with people, inviting and exploring responses, promoting difference, and then closing. And the cycle continues as the group members re-engage in the following week. Prochaska and De Clementi have the stages of change model, and it's a very familiar one to a lot of people. The notion that to be able to change, people are at a point generally where they don't know they need to. Maybe they move through a step of realizing that they do need some kind of change in their life, making preliminary decisions, then taking action, maintaining that change, and then perhaps moving into a relapse. There are multiple exit points, but the change in the learning gets more substantial each time you go around. What I've suggested is that you can blend these multiple understandings. You can blend a cyclical, a linear, and an organic understanding of group work into this model of group evolution. And it's generally, I think, portrays the types of experiences that we have in social work more readily. You can see that there is a general moving forward, and I've overlaid it on Tuckman's 5 stages. There's a general moving forward, but there is also a lot of moving around and in between, back and forward and in between. For example, a group may get to the point of having negotiated their goals and negotiated their behaviours, that is what they're going to do and how they're going to be with each other. But a new member might join a group and they have to go back and renegotiate those things, re-engage. And there can be a lot of toing and froing there. This model also accepts the fact that there's work to do before a group commences, which I've called conception, and a lot of work to do after a group ends, which I've called infusion. And then that allows the cycle of reflection to inform how we can do the group better next time, or how we can work with the same people, but in a more effective way, if necessary. You could be forgiven for thinking this looks a little bit like a roller coaster. So let's have a think about that for a minute. We know that roller coasters are an extreme experience, and that some people love them and some people hate it. A roller coaster looks random and is a very in-the-moment experience, but there is, in fact, a great deal of safety. There are safety regulations. It is guided by the supervisor, and it still follows the rails. So I think we can draw an analogy from this roller coaster and say, well, perhaps groups have the same kind of edge to them. Some people love them, some people hate them. They are random, they're extreme, but there's safety, there's guidance. It's in the moment, but there's still following some kind of sense of boundary and direction to it. Now, the way that groups move around this model also depends on other things. For example, the type and the length of the group, the setting, the context, the agency support, the different communication patterns that are occurring during the group, and what kind of learning styles people are connecting with. Group diversity has a big thing to play. If a group is all the same, maybe they might move through some of the earlier steps in the group's evolution more quickly, but they may stagnate when it comes to finding out that they need a more diverse range of resources to actually achieve their goal and to be well with each other. People's individual reasons for joining a group also has an impact, as does their previous experience of being in a group. Not only that, the facilitator's experience has a part to play in how well a group progresses around this model of evolution. What we do know is that we're delving into people's lives, and people, human beings, are complex. There are times when people come to us for help through group work, and they're generally coming as people who are struggling, hurting, traumatized and vulnerable, and yet also bringing agendas. So it's a complicated mix of things to be dealing with. Even with a blend of multiple understandings, group work is still messy, and sometimes that can cause us discomfort. Now, there are lots of different things about discomfort for us as facilitators. One of those is the unknown. If we're uncomfortable about the unknown, then the correct response to that is to engage. And we need to take time to engage with the people. We need to take time to engage with the process. And we need to take time to engage with the content and allow our group participants to engage with those things. If the unexpected is what causes us discomfort, then planning is a really, really useful strategy. Now, that may seem a little bit contradictory because you can't plan for every contingency, but you can plan for a lot of them. So have a plan A, have a plan B, have a plan C. May seem counterintuitive, but the more planned you are, the more able you will be to respond to situations in the moment. If disclosure or vulnerability is a source of discomfort, then remember that boundaries and group rules exist, and they are there for everybody, including us as facilitators. If making a mistake with a new technique is going to cause us discomfort as a facilitator, then the obvious solution to that is to practice. And it's important to not use a technique that you're not familiar with. If what makes us uncomfortable is the constraints of a planned program, if we're someone who's more comfortable kind of doing things in the moment and being more flexible and random, we need to learn to trust a program when it's an evidence-informed program and then run with it. And again, it seems a little counterintuitive, but the more that you use a planned program, the more you will be able to respond organically and dynamically to people's experiences and people's needs. Public speaking can sometimes cause us discomfort, and the response to that is to get training and to practice in front of your peers. Your peers are always going to be your harshest critics, so if you can do it in front of them, you can do it in front of anybody. Reading out loud in front of others, research has told us, is a big source of discomfort and fear. So take a moment to reflect on that. If it's an issue for you, then again, it's about practicing, but it's more likely to be an issue for your group participants. So it's obviously an important thing about creating an environment of safety is to make sure that people know they don't have to read out loud in front of others if they don't want to. One of the things that is more difficult for facilitators is being able to justify our decisions and our actions in groups. And that's why it's so important to be connected with theory, a theoretical framework and a grounding in why we're doing what we're doing. Revisit your own training. Update yourself with some more background reading. Getting supervision is a really key point here, because even though we're really experienced, we will always need an even more experienced person at times to give us some feedback, to give us some constructive criticism, and to give us ideas for doing something differently. The big thing about being able to justify your decisions and your actions in a group is to make sure that you have a very clear purpose for everything you do in a group. Don't just use some kind of activity as a way of filling in time or because people might think it's a fun thing to do. In social work, we need to be much more clear, planned, and purposeful than that. Where it comes to things like physical discomfort or not being liked, what I generally say to people is, well, these groups are not about you. And there's some things that either you got to get over it, or perhaps if it is a very sensitive issue for you, then get some help with it. There are always going to be times where the messiness of group work is difficult to come to grips with. There are some ways to minimize this discomfort, and that's what I've just gone through for us as group facilitators, but it's always going to be messy. And it's fairly certain that group participants are going to be far more intensely uncomfortable than us. So that any risks that we take to go beyond our own comfort zone are minimal in comparison to the discomforts and the risks that our group participants are going to be taking. We shouldn't expect everything to be tied into a neat package, because messiness is a normal part of human group work experience. Lastly, I just want to be able to remind you that group work is not about you, but taking all these things into consideration, you will be brilliant. I want to thank you for joining me and hope you can reconnect with me at some other point. Bye.